The Great Wealth Transfer. How crises move money to the top history is written in the shadows of great crises. Every time the world shakes, whether through war, recession, or a global pandemic, not only people and nations change, but wealth itself changes hands. And that shift is never equal. In every major crisis, wealth flows quietly from the broad masses to a tiny group at the very top. This flow is so silent, so subtle, that by the time people realize what happened, it's already too late. This cycle has a name: the Great Wealth Transfer. In this documentary, I'll reveal one of the most hidden economic mechanisms in human history: how crises reshape financial power, who benefits the most, and why the same winners appear again and again. If you're ready, let's unlock the door to history. 1. The hidden face of crises. Same outcome, same winners. Every major crisis unfolds as if written by the same invisible hand. First comes panic. Uncertainty spreads, headlines darken, markets collapse. And then, people are forced to sell their assets, small businesses shut down, the middle class sinks into debt, unemployment rises, prices crash across the market. The victims of this cycle are always the same, the masses. But at the very same moment, another scene unfolds, silent and unseen. Large funds buy assets at bargain prices. Banks accumulate property. Giant corporations acquire weakened competitors. Financial elites multiply their wealth. For the lower classes, a crisis is destruction. For the upper classes, it is a golden age. This isn't new. Throughout history, every crisis has functioned as a machine that transfers wealth upward. 2. The 1929 crash. Total collapse, total acquisition. When the market collapsed in 1929, America sank into chaos. Banks failed, savings disappeared, millions lost their jobs. Newspapers were filled with stories of ruin and desperation. But there was another side to this story. Weeks before the crash, major investors had already closed their positions. When panic hit its peak, those same investors returned to the market, buying companies, buildings, and land for a fraction of their true value. While the public lost everything, a powerful minority experienced one of the greatest buying opportunities in history. This became one of the earliest and clearest examples of the wealth transfer cycle. 3. The 2008 mortgage crisis, a modern silent heist. Years later, in 2008, the world collapsed again. Millions lost their homes, jobs, and life savings. But the most shocking part was this: the very financial institutions responsible for the collapse were rescued by the government. While ordinary people paid the price, these institutions were propped back up. Meanwhile, during the deepest part of the crisis, massive investment funds bought homes, corporations, and debt packages for pennies on the dollar. A few years later, those assets doubled in value. Funds recorded historic profits, and the public was still struggling to recover. Once again, the crisis served the same purpose. Wealth moved from the bottom to the top. 4. The pandemic, the largest wealth explosion in history. The most recent example is still fresh: the pandemic. The entire world shut down overnight. Millions of businesses disappeared. Millions lost their income. Global uncertainty reached historic levels. And yet, during the exact same period, the world's richest 1% increased their wealth by over $3 trillion. Tech giants hit record valuations. Logistics and e-commerce exploded in size. Mega funds turned the market collapse into a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. For ordinary people, the pandemic was a disaster. For mega capital, it was one of the greatest wealth booms ever recorded. Was this coincidence? Or was it part of a larger, recurring pattern? 5. How this cycle works. The mechanism. The mechanism behind the great wealth transfer is simpler than it seems. It follows 4 predictable steps. 1. A crisis happens or is allowed to happen. Uncertainty surges, market values fall sharply, too small investors panic. People sell their homes, stocks, businesses, and assets out of fear. 3. Big capital buys the bottom. Funds, banks, and megacorporations step in and buy at extremely low prices. 4. The crisis ends. Prices recover. Assets rebound in value, multiplying the wealth of those at the top. And the results? The middle class shrinks. The lower class weakens. Wealth becomes more concentrated. Power gathers in fewer hands. Every crisis widens the economic gap. 6. The invisible powers. Who plays this game? Here comes the critical question. Who drives this cycle? The answer is not a single person, nor a single organization, but the structure is unmistakable. Investment giants managing over $10 trillion, central banks with unlimited money creation power, global investor networks influencing policy, tech and media conglomerates, multinational corporations, financial groups connected to political decisions. All of them grow stronger during crises, all of them emerge larger afterward, and all of them sit at the receiving end of the wealth transfer pipeline. They are not completely invisible, they simply prefer the shadows, because real power doesn't seek attention. 7. Crises as a reset. Ownership is redistributed. Every crisis acts as a reset mechanism, but not for the public, not for justice or fairness. A crisis resets ownership. Before the crisis, an asset might be held by 1 million people. After the crisis, the same asset may belong to only a few thousand. That's why the great wealth transfer isn't an accident. It is a method. As the global economy expands, this transfer accelerates. Today, 50% of global wealth is held by the top 1%. 90% of the world's investments are controlled by around 10 megafunds. Most market movements are driven by algorithms, AI, and giant institutions. This structure does not fear crises. Crises reinforce it. 8. The big picture. Is this a system? Now the pattern becomes clear. 1929, wealth concentrated at the top. 2008, wealth concentrated at the top. Pandemic, wealth concentrated at the top. What are the odds that such enormous events all lead to the same outcome? In the financial world, there's a saying, if something happens 3 times, it's not a coincidence anymore. So are crises truly natural events? Or are they part of a mechanism that protects the power of financial elites? No one can give a perfect answer. But the data points to a simple truth. As crises grow, wealth becomes even more concentrated at the top. The world is entering a new economic era. Uncertainty is rising. Debt levels are exploding. Technology is tightening its grip. And all of this is laying the foundation for the next massive transfer. 9. Final. Who will win the next crisis? History teaches us this. The masses act with emotion. Capital acts with mathematics. Markets collapse in fear. The powerful rise through opportunity. Every crisis is a race. But it's not a race open to everyone. The winners are known. They are the invisible architects of capitalism. They shape the direction of money. They turn every collapse into another empire-building moment. As the world edges closer to the next crisis, one question remains. Will the cycle repeat itself, or will people finally recognize the rules of the game? Time will tell. But history writes one thing clearly. The great wealth transfer is still happening, and the final chapter has not yet been written.